Welcome to 999 Show Live Talk Friday night. I'm going to start this conversation out with 2026 goals. I don't know if you set goals, but usually I don't. It's not really like a New Year's resolution, but it's kind of like that. So this morning, I was kind of thinking about things of what I wanted to do for 2026. And one of the things that I wanted to do in this new year coming up is get up earlier in the day, get up before, as I've mentioned multiple times, that I caregive for my mother, who is in, I guess she'll be closer to 90 than she is to 80 this next year coming up. But to get up before she does, and that way I can take a little bit of time to do some meditation, stare out the window, stare at my light, and do some reading, and sit on, do a little exercise and so forth while I'm drinking coffee. And so that's one of my first goals that I wanted to work on for 2026. But another reason that I kind of wanted to do that is that I would like to do, I don't know if it's possible, because I'm like a retired bartender, and getting up at the butt crack of dawn is just, oh God, it's so painful, because I've always been this night person who stayed up late. But nevertheless, I'm going to try and wake up earlier in the day. That's one of the goals I have for 2026. Now, another goal I have for 2026 is to get my blood sugar under control. I'm pre-diabetic, but I need to really, really concentrate on diet and exercise. And so it's really imperative, because I don't want to slip into diabetes. And so that's kind of one of the things, I've been struggling with blood sugar issues probably for 20 years. But there's been like 12 years that I know of. That's when it was tested. I do remember a doctor telling me that it was getting kind of high, like in 2008. So that's almost 20 years ago that it's starting to get kind of high. So I think that I've been pre-diabetic for 20 years at least, maybe more. So I need to work on getting my diet under control, getting my blood sugar under control, and trying to make a exercise routine stick. I've never been successful at getting the exercise habit. People talk about, oh, you just got to do this for like 90 days, and you'll get a habit, and you'll get into the habit of it, and it'll just be fine. And pretty soon, welcome, um, Keela, welcome. And so, you just do this, and then, oh, it'll just be great. And you'll get the habit. But that habit has never worked for me. Now, when I was living up in Seattle, I walked about 50 miles a week. That's because I moved up to Seattle from McMinnville, Oregon, moved up to Seattle without a car. I moved up there without the automobile. I left my automobile behind, and so I was forced to walk. So I walked to work. I walked home from work. And I got to a point where, when I was doing all the high cat camel, I got to the point where I could do a 12.5-minute mile. I could cross. I could, and I was running in dress shoes too, because I did accounts receivable, accounts payable accounting at a door and window store for a lot of years, and so I did this kind of work. I also was a treasurer at a St. Vincent de Paul chapter in Seattle, and so I did accounting type work. And so I often, now granted, at my workplace, they didn't have a dress code, but I found that when I wore a sports coat and a tie, people treated me different on the bus. So I was treated like a lawyer instead of like a damn bum. But so anyway, so I've been struggling with the exercise and doing all of that stuff and exercising and struggling with my blood sugar for 20 years, and that whole thing of exercise, getting an exercise routine, it hasn't worked for me. And so maybe it never will, but so it's something you got to like force yourself to do, to exercise. And I've been kind of lax in the last couple of years. And so that's one of the 2026 goals. I've been working on it for a couple of months now still, but that's something I just got to do. So another goal I have for 2026 is to go through the lessons in the ACIM. And ACIM is a book called A Course in Miracles. I first got this book in 1986 when I had just I was out of high school, and someone at a store told me about this book, A Course of Miracles, and I found a copy of it down at the beach. And now that particular copy, I don't know where it's at anymore. So I ordered a few books, and they're coming, and that's like one of the books I'm gonna go through. So that leads me to another goal I have for 2026 is to read one book a month. So in these 2026 goals is to dial way back on the social media, way back on just the listening to political commentary in the morning and all that. So in my morning hours, to begin reading books and reading books again. It's been a while since I just read books because, like when Facebook came online, and because I used to read all the time, but when Facebook came online, and then, I got my first YouTube account and so forth and etc. Well, the amount of time I spent reading just whittled its way down. And the last time I read a whole lot of books was it was before I started bartending, but there was a time between 2012 and 2016 that I was reading on a Kindle Paperwhite, and I was reading books all the time. But I kind of wanted to go back to reading actual physical books. And so then I have a big stack of books, and like this is one of the books I want to read. I've had this book for years. I've never read it. It's Taken. This was a mini series that I absolutely love. This mini series, and I've watched it several times. But usually, people load it up on YouTube, and then it gets copyright striked or something like that, and they pull it down. And so this is about like a three. It's like the Thornbirds of alien abduction kind of a book. So it's a story very much like, yeah, if you've ever read the Thornbirds, I've read that one a lot of times too. I need to see the Thornbirds again. So you've been on YouTube ever since you was introduced to calming movie. That's kind of cool, yeah. And so we have this book. But nevertheless, let me get on with my list of goals for 2026. And so reading a book a month. So that means I want to have a minimum of 12 books that I want to read. And then another one of the things that I want to do is I want to read through all of the English translated versions of the Gnostic Gospels that exist that we know of. And so I have this book. This has 4 of the Gnostic Gospels, and so for my Christmas present to me, I bought a complete collection of the Gnostic Gospels, and those are coming in the mail. Like, welcome back, Ion. Welcome back. And so this morning I read from the Gospel of James. Is it the secret God? Yeah, it's the secret book of James. So the secret book of James. I read the whole thing. Because when you don't read a while, when you haven't actually read for a while, you get easily distracted. And so but I do remember in the past, when it came to picking back up reading, you have to actually commit to it. And so that's why I'm committing myself to at least 12 books for 2026, to read one book a month. And then I'm going to have hopefully this guy come on 999 show and do an interview. His name is H.G. Roberts. And actually, I bought his book, and that's coming too. It'll come in like 2 weeks. And hopefully I can read the whole book, and then in February I can have him come on and we can have that conversation. I can go through his experience with the book, kind of do like regular podcaster things, kind of like that. Do the whole real podcaster thing going on. Anyways, so that's that. Read a book a month. Now, another thing I want to do is bone up on my church history, because I did a long time ago, late 90s. And actually in the 90s, and when I studied religion in college, and I went in, did some more study of religion, mostly biblical theology and things like that, and church history and stuff like that. So I kind of wanted to bone up on my early church history, because it kind of comes up a lot. Not a whole lot, but it's like one of those things you forget these things, and it's something that interests me. But it might be able to get it. Like, I'm probably going to try and get another book by Elaine Pagels. I have one, Satan, and Elaine Pagels is like a premier. She's like a scholar, an ancient, a church scholar. She has written on the Gnostic Gospel. She has written, because there was like I saw a lecture on with her the other day, and she talked about, and I had never thought about this before, because as a Catholic, you have the Perpetual Virgin, and so she talked about that the individual, of course, and I saw that a little bit too when I was looking at the Gnostic Gospel. So this is more of a Gnostic idea, in a Gnostic, sort of a Gnostic Christian idea, is that everybody has essentially four parents. We have four parents. We have two fathers and we have two mothers. And you have your biological father and your biological mother, and you have your spiritual father and your spiritual mother. And so your spiritual father, which is not, to my understanding, which is not the God of the universe, it's just the God of earth. Welcome back. Welcome back. Oh, you're just going to sleep. Okay. All right, that's good. And so you have four parents, two biological parents, and two spiritual parents. And so you have God the Father and God the Mother. And God the Mother is the Holy Spirit. And so if I look at this icon here, you would look, this is God the Mother with a child. So God the Mother, Jesus is not God the Father. Jesus is in the Trinity. In my understanding, in the Trinity, you put the Christ or the Jesus figure right up in that. You put all of creation in that spot where the Christ, not Jesus, not the earthly Jesus, but the Christ comes into. And so this is Gnostic ideas. We're looking at Gnostic ideas. Gnostic ideas actually kind of make a little bit more sense to me. But anyways, that is that, to kind of about early church history, but mainly I wanted to focus more upon the Gnostics, because the church kind of shut the Gnostics down and so forth. And so there was, maybe I want to see why for myself. see why for myself. Why did the church shut the Gnostics down? Okay, so that's another goal. So another goal I have is that I want to begin live streaming on Tools of Fortune at an earlier time in the day, which is like earlier. I did one this afternoon, but earlier in the day, maybe for a little while. And then we're going to go and then another would be, this is really lofty and it's likely to not happen, but it is to, I used to be able to read Hebrew, not very advanced, but I used to be able to read Hebrew without a kind of muddle through and look. And so I'd like to do a refresher in reading Hebrew. And so that's kind of my goal. So I want to, while we're here and just talking and hanging out and talking, I'm going to show you just some of the books that I have on my list to read. Now, this is one of them, but it's about the Gnostic Gospels. But it's not really, because reading the Gnostics is actually separate from my goals of reading a book a month. And so one of them is, which I said, this is just for fun, is reading this one, Taken, reading this for fun. And that's one of the books I have. Another book I have is this, The Lost Gospel of Q. The Lost Gospel of Q. But when the Gospel of Q is what they did with when they went through the synoptic Gospels, the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and I think John as well. But they went through and looked where all of the sayings lined up. So they looked into, and what it's a theory. It's a theory that there was a source gospel that when they wrote the synoptic gospels that they all drew from a source. And so the scholars have gone back through and to try to reconstruct what they think that source gospel is, because see, there are a lot of in the Gospel of Thomas, there's a lot of similarities to the Matthew, Mark, and Luke and John gospels. And so what scholars did is they went through the synoptic gospels, and they pulled out all the sayings that are similar or almost nearly identical, and then they put those in some kind of an ordering, and then that became the Lost Gospel of Q. And so this has got it has the Gospel of Q in it, and then it also has a bunch of commentary, and it's in the easy reader version, because as you get older, you need bigger print and all that. Bigger print in order to to read things. And then another book I wanted to read is, and I've read it before, I've read it in audio, but I haven't really read it the physical book. This is a book called God, A Human History by Reza Aslan. And this book is a wonderful book. It's backwards. I have everything backwards here. Everything's asked backwards on the screen. I need to figure out how to flip the camera around so that you can see the right way version. But this book is an amazing history, because it goes through and it helps you to understand that every generation reinterprets the idea of God for itself. And oftentimes it's through the politics of the generation reinterprets God in its own image. And it's not just the Christian God, it's like all God, all of the gods, all across this little blue planet spinning around in the Milky Way. And so you can see it right. I see it backwards, but anyways, and so they can all the gods across the planet ever conjured into existence, that people have interpreted God through the eyes of politics and through the eyes of current events in the now. And that's like the central theme of this book, and it's a wonderful read. And I'm looking forward to reading from it. Maybe I'll read an S script from it right now, if I can, and I'll just go into the conclusion. Maybe that'll just lose you, so maybe I shouldn't do that. And then, yeah, no, I will. I'll read from it. I'll find something here. All right. The Nicene Compromise satisfied the emperor, but it left nearly everyone else in the church with even more questions. Do the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit share the divine substance in equal amounts? After all, while a ray of light from the sun contains the substance of the sun, it does not contain the same amount of substance as the sun. And who among the three beings had the divine substance first? The sun and the ray may be made of the same substance, but the sun is the sole source of that substance. The ray is utterly dependent upon the sun. It is the same true. Is the same true for the Father and the Son? Is the Father the originator of the substance and the Son dependent upon the Father? If that is the case, then how could an indivisible God create Jesus out of himself? Wouldn't that violate God's oneness? Wouldn't it make Jesus part of the created order, hence contradicting the Gospel of John's claim that Jesus was God from the beginning? Alternately, if the Father and the Son contain the divine substance simultaneously, then does that not mean that there are two separate yet equal divine beings at the beginning of creation? Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, how are
Welcome.
you?
I'm doing fine. So I was just kind of going through what my 2026 goals were, and kind of one of the things, the big one is I wanted to read a book a month, and actual physical books, and then and also and so I have some books that I wanted to read, and then also another book that I'm just kind of going through it, and this is another one that I have in my collection. I've read this book many times, and because I'm going to have like Desiree on the channel sometimes. Well, maybe this one is written by an indigenous American historian. I don't think he's still alive anymore, but I think he used to. I think he used to teach at like a University of Colorado or something like that. Because I first read this book like 20 years ago, or maybe, let me see. Yeah, something like that. Oh, look, like there's a. Oh, I gave it to my dad in 1999. Huh.
Oh,
I wrote something in it too, but I already read it. I had already read it because it was published in 1997. And so in this book, in Red Earth, White Lies, he talks about how Western science denies the voice of the indigenous person. And so, like one of the examples in it, and I'll just talk about it a little bit, is that Kon-Tiki. Do you remember the story of Kon-Tiki?
Mm-mm.
Have you ever heard of the story of Kon-Tiki?
Tell me.
Okay, so in Thor Heyerdahl, he was. This is in the 1800s or early 1900s, or somewhere. It was some. I think it was before the Great Depression. So I
Mhm.
don't. And then Thor Heyerdahl was. Anyways, he was this Norwegian or Scandinavian kind of an adventurer, kind of a scholar, and he proposed this idea, and that Chile was populated by people who came to Chile by boats, and they came from the Polynesian islands, and they drifted on the currents, maybe on rafts or something like that. And so what Thor Heyerdahl did is in the book Kon-Tiki, and it kind of documents the journey of that, is that he built a raft that would have been like, yeah, I think he made it out of balsa wood, or like what a person, a people might have built like 4,000 years ago,
Yeah.
5,000, a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he set it loose adrift on the currents, and essentially what happened is it ended up in Chile. It ended up off of Easter Island, which is off the coast of Chile. And so, and Vine Deloria, using that as an example, is that people on this continent and the other continent, some of them, they don't necessarily have the memory. They have a different memory of how they got here than what the white man said, how they said they got here. And that's one of the examples. And he said, well, but then he says it took a white man to prove that the white man was wrong.
I love
You
that.
know,
Yeah.
pretty much that's what he said. And then like another example that he has in there is that the Native Americans, the Indians, the red man, when the white man came here, they asked questions and said, well, how do you know this? Well, he said, well, the animals told us. And so when I watch those wild turkeys, I feel like I'm observing, and they're talking.
Yes.
And they're talking, they're not necessarily using words, but and so one of the other examples in there was that they noticed that animals knew the right herbs and plants to take when they were sick. And so the man, they observe the animals and they see, well, oh, they did this, and so that was actually, they, through observation, that was the thing that the animals were talking. And so when we dismiss so many things in our life because we don't listen to what's in our environment, because the
Not
environment is
just like
talking.
listen, but observe.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Observing. And so yeah, so that's kind of that. And that's like one of the things that I and so have you thought about anything like for your 2026 goals, or do you have anything like that going on, or do you not do stuff like that?
I'm working on my journal for next year for 2026, and I don't know that I'm going to do a year ahead reading, but I am planning on pulling cards for the months in advance and packing them away into envelopes and then having them in my planner for the time when it comes to open them. Because I
Mm-hmm.
find like if you pull all the cards at the start of the year, in January, well, when you're looking at that card in January, it could mean one thing. And then when it's actually time in September, it could mean something completely different.
Mm,
So there are some parts of my practice that I am shifting and other parts that I'm keeping. Uh,
I see.
the biggest thing that I would say that I do is I have a structured journaling practice and card pull practice, and I'm continuing those things. And then I do have some studies that I'm going to be working on next year. I'll be studying the Thoth next year. And I know that you're talking about books. This
Mm-hmm.
is a book that I'm reading right now.
To Shape Dragon's Breath.
Yes.
Okay, what
So
is that book about?
this is, I would say it's a cross between kind of like Harry Potter. Like it's kind of like Harry Potter, but it's about dragons. And instead of, being about, it's about indigenous
Oh,
and
I see.
like indigenous people. So this is written by an indigenous creator, Monaquil Black Goose. And this is book one in a series. I'm almost done with this one, and the second book comes out in February, I think. And I have
Mm-hmm.
really, really, really enjoyed this book. So, so well done. Um, it's perfect. And there's, they're addressing a lot of things throughout the series, like colonization and the way that they had to change their practices and the dances, because a lot of traditions and cultures are passed through storytelling, through music, but also through dancing. So there's a lot of that in the book. It's just really, really beautiful. So I've been enjoying this one.
Mm. Well, when you talk about that, how they're passing information down through their song and through their dances, I remember something that I had read that Native Americans used like rhythm and song as a navigational tool.
Yes. Yes, and they discuss that in the book.
And they know how far they went by what verse they were in the song. And so, I think, well, they need to go, if they're going down the Pacific coast, and they're going from what, Astoria, and then they want to get to Siletz, or or someplace like that. Then they would have a they would be pounding out the rhythms, and they would go on their ocean canoes, and then they would know where they were at by the location in the song. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, and so it's that whole sense of, this red earth, white lies, of how the arrogance of people ignoring others. And then, as they came to this country, there was, the whole, I mean, the Catholics, they came and they had, the people were savages. Their life they didn't have a value to their lives. And then they had the policies of the church was the convert or die. You can convert to Christianity but if you fail to convert, well, we're just going to kill you, because you're going to hell, and you might as well just go to hell now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, life was cheap. People didn't, and that was kind of a. But then, if you look at today and how far we've come, in a sense that life has a little bit more value. Oh, I didn't write those books. How many have I read? How many big books have I read? Well, that's a different story. That's a I don't know how many books I've read. That I do not know, but and so, yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. I lost it there. But anyway, but it was just the whole sense of the convert or die, and that people have no value. Welcome, Mama Sushi. Welcome. And she just had her baby like not
Oh,
too
that's
long ago,
amazing.
like
That's
a
right,
couple
'cause she
weeks
was
ago.
going to the hospital on the night that we did the craft show.
Yeah, and that was that. Then I was without internet for a whole week. And so,
Oh,
like, I couldn't do this show last Friday because I was without internet, and so I was just like burning through my data on my phone. And yeah,
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 that's
yeah,
tough.
that's right. Yeah,
Well, congratulations, my dear.
yeah. So
Awesome.
anyway, so you have that book about native stuff, and do you have any other books planned for the future to read?
I'm reading the It's a book that's for thought studies.
Yeah.
And I started it. I'm just on chapter 3, but I
Hmm.
think it's going to be very helpful to what I'm trying to do, which is,
I see.
take my time and learn more. I'm interested in learning about the deck, not so much the man behind the deck.
Yeah. Yeah, because he was quite a character, I hear.
Yes,
You know.
he was something else. So I am reading Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot, and that was written by Lon Milo Duquette.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I've
with
seen I've
readings
seen that.
like that, it's heavy, right? So you can only take it in small, I can only take it in small chunks.
Yeah, I hear you there. I have a couple books on Toth, but I think that I'll read them in the future sometime. Providing I get a future. I don't know. you know,
Hmm. Yeah. You
but
gotta
but
be
that's just
called.
like.
I for the longest time I never thought I would be interested in even learning Thoth or Tarot de Marseille either. Uh,
Hmm.
but in these last few months, had some interest in it, and I just decided to go for it.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, that's funny. Maria says, I can't finish reading the one I have. I start over instead of continuing. I
yeah.
get that. I
Well, that
get
happened. That happens. I mean, because I remember when I was like in high school, and I broke the law, and I I smoked some weed with some friends,
that.
and then
Hmm.
I went home. And I tried to read my reading assignment, but I couldn't make it down to the bottom of the paragraph because I kept on forgetting what the last sentence was, and so I kept reading the same paragraph over for an hour. And I get down there and think, well, what did I just read? And I went back, read it, and then go forward, get down to the end of it. What did I just read? And that just went on. And then eventually, it's like, oh crap, this isn't going to work. And then,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, so we got reading
All
about
right.
the top and everything else. All right, well, that sounds
I'm
good.
gonna hop off. It's been a long day, Bill. Like I've been
Yeah,
live since before 5 o'clock, and I'm like still live. I was on my channel for about 4 hours. Then I was at Truth Wave for about an hour and a half, and
now
so
you're
but I
here.
wanted to come over and say hello, and have a good time the rest of your live. I know it's still early over there by you, but it's past midnight here, and I'm pooped.
Yeah, yeah. It's just a little past 9 here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I went live on Tools of Fortune this afternoon for
Oh,
about
did
an
you?
hour.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I've
Awesome.
like my oven is going out.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, oh no, I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to figure out how to fix the oven. Yeah. Anyways, all right. Well, good night. Thanks for popping on for a minute.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem. Bye,
yeah.
everyone.
Bye. Wasn't that a treat? Get somebody to pop in here for just a second. Anyways, I don't know if I have anything else to say tonight. I mean, I guess we could do some. Oh, the the F2 sensor has gone out, is wearing out, and which means it's a temperature control thing. So, for instance, I put something in the oven and I put it at a low temperature, and then it was the item shouldn't have burned up to a crisp, but it shouldn't have burned up to a crisp at the 200 degrees that I put it at, but it did. And so that's where my oven is going. It's wearing out. The stove is about, I think the stove is probably 15 years old. So one of my buddies said that these older stoves, okay, you can't read it, reach. All right, all right. Thank you for popping in for a minute or two. maybe next week I'll have more things to say. But anyways, and then so we get maybe next week I'll start the call in, like a call in thing. But I have to figure out how to say it, talk. Oh yeah. So anyways, the oven is going out. It's wearing out, and so it's like one of those sucky things of life. Occasionally it happens, and geez, because we can't afford to buy a new stove. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to repair the stove. While I was looking for some things, I found this. This is I did this in 2017, and I was thinking about the words like cosmic gossip and the cafeteria agenda. It's time to go to the cafeteria because that's the agenda. Now, you know what? I would like to have, if I can, I would like to have this guy come on my show. And when I first started 999 show, I wanted to have this author, because he's a friend of mine, come on the show, and he was going to talk about some things that he knew about. But he's a writer and he's an author. Oh yeah, of course, writer and author, that's kind of synonymous. He's an author and he is a painter, and he is working on painting a tarot deck. And so maybe I'll read one of his poems. I met him up in Everett, Washington in 2010, and he's living in Canada now. I think Toronto. It's the second largest French speaking city in the world is where he lives, and he had picked up dual citizenship. When he was like 19 or 20, he married a girl from Canada, and then ended up getting divorced when he was like 40. But he acquired citizenship to Canada. And then he came back, he remarried, and then in 2019, 2020, he and his wife, they wanted to live in a large major city, but they couldn't afford any large major cities in the United States. But they found a great deal. They found a great deal in Canada, and so they bought a house outright. They sold their house in Washington. They bought a house outright, and then it did have to require some fixing up. I think he said he took almost 2 years of construction work on the inside to make it, marginally livable. It's a townhouse in the middle of a downtown area in a major metropolitan area in North America. But he's a really, really good writer. He has a mythic imagination, and so we're just gonna talk about books here. We're gonna just talk about books, and I know that nobody likes poetry, but I'm gonna read one of his poems. I don't think he doesn't make a living as an artist or writer. He like everybody else who's a creative, they have another job, and being that he's new in a different country, he does immigrant labor. He doesn't speak any French. He does immigrant labor in Canada for the most part. His wife is retired. Let's see. Let me find a poem that's not like 10 miles long. Okay, how about this one? Reality. This poem called Reality. I study the senator's face. He sits in his office of stone, trying to determine if his eyes betray compassion, because the state representative came off as world trodden, while legislative assistant seemed far too confident and bright. Pages scurry about on marble floors in crisp blue maroon suits as the grand dome boards above us, grieving one a feeling, giving one a feeling of permanence that can defy human falling. There is no living memory of the mansions who cut this stone, no one who carved the green man head, or how long this glorious structure will stand looming like Valhalla. And even if this dome should fall with inscription remain unbroken, there, mere blocks from the end of the Oregon Trail where women fought for the right of suffrage and crows strut around grass pecking on death, a situation that talks, that teaches patience, it draws on me. There is no war, there is no warriors, no persons of ill repute, there is no cash, there are no debts, no banks, no taxes, a burden. There is no Jesus, no Vishnu, no Muhammad, only love. There is no pope, no president, no king, only experience, sorrow, and joy. There is no harsh climate, no change for worse, only perfection in the storm. I am alive. I was living before this life. I will live on in a space called love. I resided only to deny my creator as we have been denied for the experiences we have chosen, the lessons we receive for that which forms our path. It was a desire that molded the body while longing pumps my heart, this cage of flesh from my cross, a nail to prevent these hands from reaching thorns, to keep these eyes from seeing back before this life, where you put finger to lips and whispered, shh, you only have to remember that you are precious and we are all born from love. Brandon Pitts, Olympia, Washington, February 2017. In the Company of Crows, a book by Brandon Pitts. Excellent author, excellent thinker, a very, very nice person. And I was talking about Vine Deloria, Red Earth, Right Light Lies. And maybe I'll just read a little section from this, from chapter 9, titled Flood, Lakes, and Earthquakes. I will say I first ran across this book on this author on the Art Bell Show back in the 90s. The Art Bell Show inspired me to do this show. And I heard this author speak, and I bought his book. That was in the late 90s. Volcanoes provide the easiest natural phenomenon to link to tribal traditions because they are not difficult to date in the geological strata. Well, let's see. Let's see if there's anything interesting. Let's go read on a little bit. This is probably a boring chapter. Am I just going to be boring you guys to death? Okay, let's go here. That is why the Squamish and The Flatheads speak the same language. We are the people who drifted away from here. We are the people who drifted away from here. For 4 days, the water continued to rise. At least it covered even the tops of the mountains. The boats were carried this way and that way by wind and waves. The people could not guide them, for there was no sun and there was no land. Then the water began to go down. For 4 days it receded. For 4 days it receded. By the time the people were scattered, some of the canoes landed along the whole river, so that those people who had lived there ever since, others lived at Shamakan on the other side of the mountains. They have lived there ever since. Only a few found their way back to the Quillout River. And so when I was taking archaeology or anthropology classes a long time ago, they talked about how the Americas were. The theory was that the Americas were populated from the on the land bridge. That there was a land bridge on the Bering Straits going from Asia to Alaska, and so the theory being is that the peoples, they were following the big game from Asia. This is over a glacier, because during the Ice Age, the ocean levels dropped, and I think that they believe that they were like 100 meters less than they are today. And so the oceans have come up 100 meters. Now that's a kilometer. So they've come up like 300 or 400 feet in the last 12,000 years. And is this stream clear? And anyways, and so the waters had receded, and they had receded down, and there was the theory that this land bridge emerged out of the sea, and it was and so the people marched across from Asia, walked across, and they were hunting and following the big game across, and then they ended up in Alaska. And then from there, they walked from the tippy top of Alaska all the way down to the bottom of South America, hunting and whatever. That this continent was like a blank slate. And but Vine Deloria, in going through going through the stories, native stories. A lot of the native stories have a different story on how people got here. And so in that little clip, there was an S script of people coming by water. And so there are these great flood myths that exist. And so in some of my theories, but of course my theories are based in part by reading Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock, another author that I ran across on the Art Bell show in the 90s. But because he also goes through and talks about those stories of where peoples may have arrived in the Americas on boats. There was the existence of the Pires map, where in the Pires map it showed the existence of Antarctica and in other mysteries. And so this map was found in I think the 1500s. And so, and then if we go do some side notes and we just do some rabbit holes, it is believed that Columbus saw some of these ancient maps, and before he set across, he knew there was more land out in the sea. He knew that if he sailed west, he was going to run into something. That's providing they can make it west, and they did, and they ran, and that's where the New World, what they called the Europeans called the New World, was discovered. But the land was already occupied; it wasn't blank. And so, with the population of this land that we are in, these stories of people coming by boat, and in that little excerpt, it was that people were on a boat and they arrived, but this was after a massive flood. And then with some of the newer research and theories that have come out, is that there is a belief that, was he the first one to have a boat? No, I don't know who the first one to have a boat was, because they didn't really talk about that. But in the Graham Hancock Fingerprints of the Gods, he is seen as that there was a previous civilization. And so he was, I think he's probably, I don't know how old he's now. He must be close to 80 now, but he has spent his life researching. He's a journalist. He's not an archaeologist, he's a journalist. And writing the story of this lost civilization that he believes existed. And so this lost civilization was a maritime civilization. It was a civilization where people were they traveled the world in boats. They wasn't, when they think of like the Atlantean civilization, a lot of people think it's like spacecraft and cars and things like that. And I don't think that's not the impression that for those who are looking into the lost civilizations of the past, that's not what they see. They see that it was just it was a civilization that was probably not much different than like medieval Europe, or or like first century Rome or something like that. That it was like okay, maybe they had it was maybe semi-Stone Age. Maybe there isn't any evidence for what they have. They haven't really found any evidence that these older civilizations, that they used metal. Maybe it was a Stone Age civilization. But even with stone tools, with carving with bone and doing stuff like that, you could still probably make boats, and boats that travel the seas. But during the Ice Age, there were the Ice Ages, because it was something that spanned like 10,000 years, maybe 100,000 years, where there were these glacial cycles that went on, and then they receded, and they went, and these glacial. But at the end of one of these glacial cycles, something happened, and there are these flood myths, and you have from the Bible, and you have from the Epic of Gilgamesh, a flood story there. You have, and Vine Deloria talks a little bit too. Is that for Native Americans, they had flood stories as well. And the theory being is that that the flood was caused by a comet or a meteor is caused by a I probably can, but I'm not going to. 619. It was caused by a big rock falling from space and slamming into an ice sheet on Greenland. Oh, I was just kind of dry. I've been talking for an hour pretty much without a break, without a drink of water. The nature of consciousness. That's an interesting question. Drink some cough syrup. I'll just have a little sip of water. But anyways, so you have consciousness is something that projects itself into your imagination so that you can see. But anyway, I do have some water here, and I want to go back to my story. And so a rock came down from the sky, and it slammed into an ice sheet, and it caused rapid melt off of water. And so the end of the last ice age, or over, and maybe it wasn't like an instantaneous thing. It may have just happened like over, because how long would it have taken for this rock? It came in and then it boiled off predetermined blue holding pencil. Okay, so this rock came in, it slammed into an ice sheet, a lot of water boiled off, and then there were a couple different things that happened. And so when you look into the biblical stories, there is the flood narrative, but there are some other stories too that I believe all point to the same point in time. And so not only was there flooding, maybe not global flooding, but flooding over in the northern hemisphere, because I think that you have like the Black Sea was filled. I think there's evidence that down at the bottom of the Black Sea, there is a settlements, and there was civilization down there. And there's evidence that 300 feet down off of many coasts, that there is evidence that there could be civilization down there, because when people build, they build near waterways. And so when our archaeologists are looking at the water, when they're looking at in places here, like where the water level is here, they're looking in the wrong place. They really need to be looking down under the sea about 300 feet, 100 meters. 100 meters is approximately 300 feet. And so they need to be looking down there. And but aqua archaeology is extremely expensive, and going down 300 feet is also pretty expensive, because you're not going to be going down. You got to go down in a submersible. Human beings, they can dive down that far, but that's a long ways down. 100 meters is a long ways down, and it's really dark down there. But there has been evidence with like side scan radar. Of course, this is stuff I just heard on the Art Bell show in the late 90s, or read about in Fingerprints of the Gods, or in some of the other books that Graham Hancock authored and collected stories together. But so that's where, if you were looking for evidence of Atlantis, you would look down there. You wouldn't look in other places. And so this rock slams into an ice sheet. It melts things off, but what it also does is it triggers volcanism. It triggers volcanoes to erupt all around that area, because it's a big when it's a big seismic event, and you have this massive amount of energy that hits the earth. And so there is evidence that there's evidence that there could have been, around 12,000 years ago, a comet strike on the comet strike. Now they think that, well, why they think with the Greenland ice sheet is that the crater, because those ice sheets were like a mile deep. You have a mile of ice, and that rock goes through that mile of ice, but it doesn't leave a dent on the ground in that rock. But there's evidence that there could have been a comet strike, or a big an asteroid or a rock that came down and hit, not one like the one they think killed off the dinosaurs. This would be a much smaller one. And so, like at Göbekli Tepe in in Turkey, this is a monument that was uncovered, what, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago. And it shows that people 12,000 years ago built things with stone. And on these monuments, they think there's pictures. They haven't really, I don't think they really interpreted them yet, but they're looking at the pictures, and some of the interpretations is that they look at things and thinking, oh, this is like a rock. Maybe this is a comet. And so what you have, like, coming forward into our civilization, you go back several thousand years, there's always this big fear of comets, and comets are like bringers of ill omens. And so people were always watching the skies, watching for stars. So you have the astronomy, you have the astrology, the zodiac, and all of these things come to us because of people watching the skies. And they're watching the skies because that's where disaster comes. Disaster comes from the sky. God strikes down from the sky. And so when you have things like comets, and you have things like eclipses, these things are ill omens. When the sun goes dark, when a meteor streaks through the sky, because past memories of bad things happening when comets appear. And so you have volcanism, you have flooding, and you have volcanism. You have volcanoes going off everywhere, and you have flooding. And so there are flood narratives all around the earth. There are flood narratives. But in the Bible, it has another story in there. There's two stories that I'm going to allude to. One is the Tower of Babel in Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, this Sodom and Gomorrah has been interpreted like 10 ways to sideways on what it could possibly mean. You have, even within the Bible, there are two different interpretations for why Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed within the Bible. But I'm looking at this as thinking, well, what if Sodom and Gomorrah refer to Atlantis? And then you think the Tower of Babel, like a singular civilization where people spoke the same language. Maybe this tower to the sky, maybe that tower to the sky is a civilization where they worked to build something to rival the gods. This tower to the sky, to go touch the sky, to go touch heaven. That they built a civilization to rival that of the gods. And so the finger of God came and destroyed that civilization and scattered those people across the earth. The tower disappeared. And so then you have the flood story about God destroyed the earth because of the Nephilim. They were these angels that bred that took human wives, that people wives, and took them as wives, and then these super beings emerged. And so we think maybe Atlantis was a place of super beings, but maybe they weren't really super beings. They're just people that had knowledge. They had learned about the world. They knew something. And you have Plato talking about Atlantis, and then in Plato's book upon Atlantis, he puts a date on it, and the date when Atlantis was destroyed was about 12,000 years ago from today. At that time, it was a different time. And so in the Bible, it is the Tower of Babel, the Great Flood in Genesis, what is it, 6? No, I used to know. And it's not Genesis 6, because I think Genesis 6 is the Cain and Abel story where Cain kills Abel. I think that's Genesis 6. It's been a while. It's been 20 years since I read the Bible the last time. Maybe in the next following year I'll read the Bible again, but this year I'm going to read from the Gnostic Gospels. In that book, the Gospel of Q. And so you have the flood, and the great flood destroys the earth. And that's that story. So you have that one, and you have flood, you have Tower of Babel, you have Sodom and Gomorrah. And Sodom and Gomorrah, which was destroyed by fire and brimstone, and that could be that there were two principal causes for the destruction of Atlantis. And Atlantis was destroyed by fire and by water. Okay. So that I went through a lot of stuff. So you're still learning how to read the Bible. Yeah. Yeah, I've read it a lot of times, but if it's like your first time reading the Bible, and that's not, I would actually go through, like, use a picture Bible. That's like if it's your first time, a picture Bible is perfect for kind of getting an overview of, like, especially with the Old Testament, you get a real good overview of just what's going on. But if you really want to get into it, then there are a lot of other resources and so forth. If you're like watching lectures on biblical stuff, I would recommend Myth Vision. And then another thing is for understanding mythologies is Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth. Joseph Campbell's passed on quite a few years ago, but he was his scholarship in the Power of Myth series was eye-opening to me. He was one of many scholars that opened my eyes to a different reality and a different way of looking at the past and looking at these things. And anyways, I talked a lot. I guess I talked a lot further than I was. So your ex-friend gave a Bible and she was helping read it, and that's why you never finished it. I see. Yeah. Yeah, I have like I said, I always wanted to learn how to I took Hebrew in college. I don't know if you can't see that, but this is the Zohar. It's Jewish mysticism, because I've always been attracted to mysticism, metaphysics, and things like that, and which is why I am a heretic. In the eyes of the church, I am guilty of wrong thinking. She used to laugh at you a lot. Oh, for your reading or for your, yeah. But anyway, I took one language and I took biblical Hebrew. Gosh, and that was like 1993 because I graduated college in 94. So yeah, it was in 93, 94. No, it was actually, it was before that. I started in the spring, and it was just me and this other girl and two of us, and we were taking the class with the professor. It was just a professor, me, and this other girl, and it was hard. I remember that it was difficult pronouncing the words. I never got there. I never got to the point where you could pronounce. But at that time, I was thinking about going and getting a master's of divinity, becoming a Lutheran pastor. So you were learning with her, and you used to ask many questions. Yeah. And so that was in my 20s, and I was thinking about becoming because I grew up as a Lutheran, and I was thinking about becoming a pastor. I wanted to be a pastor of a church, and so I was very fascinated with stuff. But what was always hanging me up, what it was always hanging me up was that inner experience, and I saw things in the liturgy. I saw things that it was almost like I was seeing secret knowledge. It was just, that's the best way to put it. The liturgy opened up my imagination, and I saw things in the liturgy that maybe other people saw this stuff, and I didn't really talk about it too much, but I did. I think I talked about it with my pastor and so forth. My pastor at that time called me a Gnostic. I was a Gnostic, and that was way more Gnostic. And then one of my other friends, she said, "No, you're just a mystic, and a mystic is a person who has a experiential relationship with whatever that is, and so it's you experience it. And for me, it's something to be experienced. It's not something, yeah, you read about it and everything. And so that was like one of my 2026 goals is to go through the workbook in the Course of Miracles. There's 365 lessons. I think the furthest I'd made it through the workbook was like 2 months. And so going through and doing 365 lessons, that's going to be a chore. But I've heard that if you do that, that can be a transformative experience. And so I'm going to try. Maybe I'll start like that in March. Then the other book that I was recommended to read was Urantia. And so that's coming. That book is coming. The Urantia book, The Course of Miracles. So it's like the second time I've bought that book. I don't know where the first copy of it, where it disappeared to, but I do remember reading it for the first time. That was like 1986, and then maybe then I do want to. I have some tarot books that I want to read. My esoteric tarot. I haven't actually read any. I have read, but I haven't finished a book on tarot. Actually, no, that's not true. There's two books that I've completely read and on tarot, and they were more or less the more mystical things and so forth. And the esoteric tarot, that's one that I'm looking forward to reading, and so forth. And so try to read one book a month. And that's also included some novels. Maybe I should also throw in there, maybe if I read more, then that's great. Maybe I might read Lord of the Rings again. Maybe I should read 1984 again. I've actually never physically read Walden. I've listened to the book as an audiobook multiple times. I'm fairly familiar with Walden Pond because Henry David Thoreau is one of my favorite American philosophers. But anyways, that's what I got going on for tonight. I'm gonna come back next week and we'll do this again. I don't know what we'll talk about, but maybe whatever it'll be. Maybe I'll have that phone number ready. So if you listeners out there want to call in, ask me a question, you're free to do so. Once I get that phone number, anyways. All right. That's all I got for you tonight. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, 619. And who else popped in here? Oh, Mama Sushi, Roman, Ion. Take was there for a second. And Kate Hummel. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. For those who did listen, for the 2 people out there listening, thank you. Thank you, Maria. And I will see you another time with another live. Maybe I'll probably do something tomorrow in the afternoon. And then, yeah, I don't know what I'll do. I'll do something. You'll find out. And then I'll be back with Jeff, I think, after the new year. Yeah, maybe after the new year. All right. Thank you, Maria. And have a wonderful night. Blessings and peace to you. And hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas. Mine was quiet. Things didn't work out the way I had planned. Different plans came about. All right. Good night. And we'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.